From the world of football coming up a little later in the program, but we'll start with our focus on Russia. Allies of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny say they will hold a protest which they hope will turn into one of the largest demonstrations in modern Russian history. The US has warned Russia that the country will have to pay a price if Navalny dies in jail due to hunger strike. A Navalny-backed medical trade union claims that his condition is critical. They claim that medical tests show Navalny's kidneys could soon fail, which could lead to cardiac arrest.
Конечно, сильно переживаю по поводу пациента, и меня очень сильно насторожили анализы, крайне высокий уровень калия, нарастание креатинина, который может свидетельствовать о прогрессировании почечной недостаточности. И поэтому, конечно, я считаю, что человека нужно спасать.
The United States has threatened Russia with quote-unquote consequences if Navalny dies in prison. Members of the European Union are expected to discuss the case. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas called for Navalny to receive immediate medical care. French President Emmanuel Macron said world powers should draw clear red lines with Russia and consider possible sanctions when they are crossed. London has also expressed concerns. On the other hand, Russian authorities accuse Navalny of exaggerating his medical condition to grab attention. They also accuse Navalny of refusing prison medical care. Authorities have pledged to ensure that he survives. Navalny began refusing food on March 31st in protest against what he said was the refusal of prison authorities to provide him with adequate medical care. He was arrested in January when he returned to Russia. He was jailed for more than 2 years in February for parole violations. And now for more on this news, we are joined by Julia Chapman from Moscow. Julia, what do we know about his latest health updates?
All we know is what we've heard from his supporters over the weekend, who say that he is in a critical condition. They say they have obtained copies of his blood work and that his potassium levels are dangerously high, that his kidneys risk imminent failure and he could be at risk of cardiac arrest as well. They say he only has a matter of days left to live if he isn't given urgent medical care. As you mentioned, Navalny has been on hunger strike for nearly 20 days now over what he says is a refusal by the prison authorities to give him adequate health care. He says he wants to see a doctor that he trusts. And so far, he says that the healthcare that's been offered to him in the prison facility has not been good enough. He was complaining of loss of sensation in his hands and back pain as well before he went on hunger strike, which is why he wanted to see a doctor. And of course, all of this comes after he had been recovering from an alleged poisoning last year. He had been receiving medical treatment for several months in Germany, and his health is fragile, his supporters say, which is why his health needs to be treated very carefully. But of course, Russia denies that he was poisoned. There's been no investigation into his illness last year. So his supporters say he simply isn't receiving the adequate treatment because they don't acknowledge that he was ever poisoned.
Right, Julia. Protesters are saying this will be the biggest demonstration in modern Russian history. What can you tell us about the protests that have been planned?
Well, his supporters hope they will be the biggest. They have tried to garner a number of signatures. They were aiming for 500,000 before they announced fresh protests. And they were originally protests over the jailing of Navalny back in January when he was arrested on return to Russia from treatment in Germany. But now they say the situation is so dire they simply cannot wait any longer because his health is in such a poor condition. And also his groups, his campaign groups, have been threatened with extremist status, with being labelled as extremists, which would basically make their operations entirely impossible here in Russia, which is why they have said that there must be a protest this week. They've called for one on Wednesday, and that, of course, will be the same day that President Vladimir Putin is delivering his annual Federal Assembly address, his landmark speech that he gives every year. The protesters are trying to overshadow that by holding a big protest across the country that evening. They haven't yet managed to get to 500,000 signatures. They're about 40,000 shy of that number. And of course, all the people that have signed up won't necessarily turn out because there are serious repercussions for people who join unauthorized protests in Russia. Even the protests that were held in January when Navalny was originally jailed, people have been slapped with all kinds of administrative and criminal charges since then, and most of his team remains either behind bars or under house arrest or have already flown the country because of the risk to their lives, they say, for organizing protests. So we're not quite sure what the turnout will be, but his supporters say this is basically the lost opportunity to make their sentiments known about the health of Navalny, about his jailing, and about the future of Russian politics going forward.
Julia, you mentioned about threats. Now, US has also threatened Russia of consequences if Navalny dies in prison. What kind of consequences are we looking at?
It's unclear exactly what is being threatened here, but of course more sanctions are definitely on the table. There were new ones announced just last week over alleged interference in the presidential election in the United States in 2020, targeting certain officials in the Russian government, as well as expelling diplomats from the United States. So those are some of the measures that might also be on the table. Of course, human rights organizations are very concerned about what could happen to him if he is not given urgent medical treatment. Of course, we heard from the Russian ambassador to the United Kingdom over the weekend, who says that Navalny will not be allowed to die on their watch. There have been suggestions that he could be force-fed because he has been on hunger strike for a few weeks now and is dangerously starving at the moment. But we don't know exactly what kind of consequences there could be if he is allowed to die in prison.
All right, Julia, stay on with us. We'll come back to you for some more updates. Another story also from Russia. In a tit-for-tat move, Russia on Sunday expelled 20 Czech diplomats, giving them 24 hours to leave the country. Now, this action comes after the Czech Republic on Saturday expelled 18 Russian diplomats, giving them 72 hours to leave. The Czech Republic said that 2 alleged Russian spies accused of a nerve agent poisoning in Britain in 2018 were behind the deadly explosion at a Czech ammunition depot 4 years earlier. The Czech Republic said it had informed NATO and its European allies that it suspected Russia of causing the 2014 blast. European Union foreign ministers were set to discuss the matter today. The row is the biggest point of crisis between Prague and Moscow since the end of Soviet domination of Eastern Europe in 1989. Let's go back to Julia, who joins us live from Moscow. Julia, now Russia has reacted to Czech Republic expelling diplomats by expelling diplomats of their own.
That's right, they have, and they've called the expulsion of Russian diplomats an anti-Russian move. They've denied any involvement in this explosion that took place in 2014, and they point to the fact that investigators in the Czech Republic had initially laid the blame with the ammunition depot's managers. Now, they say, the Czech Republic says that since then more information has come to light after the 2018 Salisbury poisonings, when Sergei Skripal, a Russian double agent, and his daughter Yulia were targeted with a nerve agent in the British town of Salisbury. They, of course, the British government then pointed the finger at Russian spies. They were later identified by investigators Bellingcat as being 2 men that are known to be Russian GRU agents. And now the Czech Republic says these 2 same men were in the country in the days ahead of this ammunition blast at a depot in the Czech Republic, which ended up killing 2 people. Russia, of course, denies any involvement in either incident, be it the Salisbury poisonings or this Czech blast, and they say that this is an anti-Russian move, which is why they've moved to expel 20 Czech diplomats, but given them even less time to leave the country. They need to be out by the end of today.
Right, and that was Julia Chapman reporting live from Moscow. Turning our attention